Welcome to our Chesterfield Chamber Candidates Forum. I'm Danielle Fitzhugh, the Chesterfield Chamber President, and this is our fourth in a series of candidates forums we are doing for the General Assembly House of Delegate offices that are up for election on November 2nd. I want to welcome Mark Earley to our conversation, and then give a big thanks to Bo Brown, who has served as past chair of our Government Affairs Committee here at the Chamber and is currently serving as one of our Chamber Board of Directors for holding down the fort for us today and facilitating the conversation. Mark, you'll have a couple minutes to just provide a brief opening introduction, and then the same at the end. You'll have a couple minutes. We've got a dozen or so questions that Bo will go through with you. And we did have an open invitation to both candidates, but you have the show solo today for us. So we thank you for giving us this time. And so with that, I will turn it over to Bo. Thank you again, and take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay, Mark, what we're going to do here is I'm going to ask you a series of questions under a couple of different categories. The first would be education and workforce development, healthcare affordability, economic development and business climate, and lastly, state versus local authority. Because it's just you, we are going to, we're going to first obviously let you introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself with the campaign, and then we'll kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it by asking you a few questions, starting with obviously education and workforce.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Bo, and thank you, Danielle, and thank you to the Chesterfield Chamber. I appreciate y'all being willing to have me on and for hosting this series. So thank you so much. Let me just start by telling you very shortly about myself, who I am, why I'm running, the kind of things I'm focused on. Then I look forward to our conversation. So my name is Mark Earley, candidate for the House of Delegates in the 68th District, which is about half in Chesterfield, and it's a big chunk of North Chesterfield. So Bon Air is where I live, and then, it goes Bon Air, Robius, Walton Park, Salisbury, all those areas, and a lot of Smoke Tree, Stonehenge. So yeah, I'm a lifelong Virginian. I was born down in Chesapeake, Virginia, down by the beach, but I came up to Chesterfield when I was about 12, moved in and lived in Salisbury. I went to product of Chesterfield County Public Schools, went to Midlothian Middle School, started high school at Midlow High before we moved to Northern Virginia for a couple years where I wrapped up. I went to Virginia Tech where I met my wife, studied all non-tech things, political science, history, English, that sort of thing. And then when I came back, we got married right after school and we moved to Richmond. So we've been in the area, either in Richmond or Chesterfield the last 12 or so years. Spent several years working with Governor Bob McDonnell's administration on prisoner reentry issues. So he had convened what he called the Prisoner and Juvenile Reentry Council with a lot of stakeholders. And what we were trying to do was reduce recidivism and give folks a better path when they were coming out of the correctional system to get on the right track, both for moral and fiscal reasons. So, and then I went back to law school at the University of University of Virginia, where I graduated from, and have been practicing law ever since. Did a clerkship right out of school. Spent several years at a big law firm, and then last few years have been small family firm. And the bulk of what I do is criminal defense work, along with a few other things. And my wife and I are also foster parents through Richmond City. And I tell you those two things because, being wrapped up in the world of criminal justice as well as in the foster care system, you're not always meeting folks on their best day. In fact, a lot of times you're meeting folks on their worst day. And it gives you sort of a real sense, I think, into the everyday on the ground struggles of real folks and how policy ends up connecting with real people's lives. Right. So you see all sorts of issues, whether it's, lack of a stable or solid education, lack of stable housing, mental health issues, addiction issues, all these sort of things. And then, of course, if you combine that with, a string of bad decisions, you end up in a place, where you don't want to be. So you get a sense of these things. And I tell you that because, if I am sent to the General Assembly, these are the kind of things and these are the kind of folks that I'm going to have in my mind when I'm thinking about policy and decisions and all that sort of thing. So when I look around Virginia, and I'll stop here in a second so we can get to the questions, but when I look around the last 2 to 4 years, I think we are. I think the General Assembly has lost focus, and I think we're not doing as much as we could, particularly for these kind of folks that I'm talking about, but as well as Virginians as a whole. We've had. It's been a long, difficult couple of years, of course, with COVID and the pandemic, and enduring that both on a business front and a school front. We've had a year and a half of closed schools, and we're trying to get back on track with that. But we've experienced huge learning loss, and just the challenges there are immense. We had shut down businesses and, an overall difficult climate, especially for small business. And then, of course, we're also, unfortunately, enduring a crime spike. We got a 20-year high murder rate and just an overall spike in crime. So these are very complex problems. What I'm interested in is working with folks of all persuasions on concrete solutions to those issues. So that's what I hope to do. And thank you again for having me for this conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for being here. And, thank you for putting all your time and energy into running and attempting to serve our community.
Well, thank you.
All right, we'll get it kicked off with education and workforce development. Can you briefly explain your overall philosophy on K through 12 education?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that's a big question, but I think it's fundamental. It's critical. I myself, am a product of public schools, went to public schools all the way through both K to 12, and then also Virginia Tech and UVA, so both state universities. I think it's critical to the basics of education for kids, and I think it's also critical to workforce development and getting our kids ready to go where they need to go. I'll tell you let me just tell you in broad strokes, and then obviously feel free to follow up or pin me down on whatever or wherever you want to go specifically. But so in broad strokes, we've had a very difficult, as I mentioned, last couple of years, right? And I think the background of that starts with the school closures, which were extremely difficult on a lot of folks, particularly working parents, particularly kids with special needs. So obviously, I'm very, very glad that schools are back open again. I wish they had been open sooner, especially in Richmond City, who they never really opened back up for an entire school year. But that has sort of set the table for a lot of work to be done. I think parental involvement in education is absolutely critical. I know we've heard a lot about that in recent weeks here. I think we should be doing everything we can to encourage a cooperative, transparent, helpful relationship between parents, school boards, teachers. I think, unfortunately, some of the, not just policy, but also some of the attitudes has sort of created an adversarial relationship, whether it's between, parents and school boards or parents and teachers. And I think that's been unhelpful. I think we need to bring folks together. And I don't know, our teachers do a phenomenal job. And I don't know any teacher who doesn't want more parental involvement in schools. So I think that's something we always need to work toward. I think we need to keep our standards high. I know there's been, talk about lowered standards and getting rid of advanced placement classes and all that sort of things. You saw New York City take those kind of steps recently. And I think that comes from a misguided way of thinking about this. I think you respect kids and you respect families when you keep standards high. And I think that actually, lifts all boats. I think you want to hold folks to a high expectation. I want to make sure we keep, politics out of the classroom. That's also been a big topic. I think we need to focus on bread and butter, reading, writing, arithmetic, all those sort of things that really matter. We're falling behind in a lot of those categories. And I think it's because, I think the General Assembly has been, I also think we have gotten distracted by a whole lot of different things, sometimes sort of hot button topics. But I think we need to get back to basics when it comes to education. I think we need to, I think everybody agrees. It's really just a matter of whether we're going to have the will to do it or not. Raise teacher pay, get it at least up to the national standard. We got a lot of school infrastructure issues we got to deal with. So there's a lot to do, but this is critical. I mean, it's obviously the foundation for a lot of kids. And I'll end with just saying, I think, again, I'm a product of the public school system, so we need to do everything we can to support and fully fund our public schools. At the same time, I think every parent knows that kids aren't one size fits all. I don't think our education system should be one size fits all. I think I'm in favor of, enhanced parental choice in education. I'm in favor of a diversity of options. I think, the more you have that, the better the education system will be, and it can, flourish. So that's what I'm for. And it's a hugely important topic, obviously.
Thank you. Are you in favor of getting rid of standards of learning? What is your plan to get us away from teaching to the test and focusing more on teaching to content and or curriculums?
Yeah, I think, the where we land very specifically on that, I think is yet to be seen. But I think there is a consensus that there's too much teaching to the test. So I think we absolutely gotta take steps to get away from that. I mean, obviously you have to have some sort of, metric by which to see how we're doing and see how our teachers are doing. But I do think we have placed way too much emphasis on standards of learning, and I think it's distracted. It's been an obstacle, I think. So I think we always need to be looking at reforms there, and that's one thing I would be looking forward to doing.
Excellent. Virginia mandates 2 industry credentials for students when they graduate high school. How does that play into your ideas around education?
Well, I think that sort of thing is critical because I went to college. College is great, but it's not necessarily for everybody. I mean, there's a whole lot of immediate workforce opportunities that folks, if they don't want to go the higher ed route, can take. So I think as a general matter, I think we have been a little too eager to immediately funnel every single person into, immediately from high school into a 4-year college program. I think, again, back to the idea of kids aren't one size fits all and our young adults aren't one size fits all. I think we should have a diversity of options. I think we should partner with local businesses, with local workforce leaders I think they can have a hand in crafting some curriculum, right? I mean, I think it makes sense to develop partnerships between our school systems and our local industries and our local workforce folks, because I think there's a lot of great careers and great job opportunities to be had for folks right out of high school, frankly. So, and college is expensive. So, it's the right choice for a lot of folks. It's not the right choice for everybody. So I think the more choices, the better. And I think the more options we have for technical training, on the job apprenticeships, and bleeding those two things, between high schools and our industries, our local industries, I think the more of that, the better.
Yeah, and that parlays directly into the next question is talk about the importance of continuing to support training centers like the Community College Workforce Alliance and other community college programs.
Yeah, I think it's critical. I think especially when especially in a time where just generally we're having some economic woes. I mean, I think we want to have as many people as possible workforce ready as soon as possible, right? There's a lot of times where people sort of fall into the gap and then it's hard to get out of the gap. But small businesses and, technical work, a lot of that is the backbone of our economy. They have really been hurt over the last year and a half, 2 years, not only from the economic shutdowns, but just all things COVID, as well as I think an environment that has not been, particularly helpful. I mean, I think generally speaking, we have an environment that's too highly taxed, too highly regulated. I think, we want to create a climate that's welcoming to small businesses, that's welcoming to entrepreneurs, that's welcoming to all sorts of businesses. So, but those kind of, training centers and everything else are absolutely critical. And I want to get, especially our young folks, I want to have every opportunity for them to be connected with them as soon as possible so that folks can get on a career path early. I think that's going to be better for them and better for everybody.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to healthcare affordability. And this starts a little broad and it's going to get a little more specific as I ask the question.
Sure.
A significant issue facing businesses is rising healthcare costs.
Mm-hmm.
One way that companies can combat healthcare costs is through group insurance plans. Do you support the expansion of group insurance plans like multiple employer welfare arrangements to make healthcare more affordable?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. I think, healthcare is obviously a massive topic, and it's not just, economic. It's obviously very personal. It's a life and death thing, and people depend on it. And everybody's got to have it. I think the problems with, generally speaking, our healthcare and health insurance industries are the reason it's unique among industries is, number one, is necessary for everybody, but also it oftentimes lacks the transparency and portability of a lot of other products, right? So I think anything we can do in healthcare to increase the transparency of it, so people understand what they're paying for, where the money goes, how to wisely spend that money, and anything that it can increase portability of insurance. I think anything that we can do to get us closer to those things is a smart move. I 100% would support increased group plans and sharing plans. It just makes sense. I mean, any sort of flexibility is better there. So yeah, I'm all for that. I'm all for a variety of different healthcare options. I mean, for some folks that are, very young, very healthy, they can decide, but I don't think it necessarily makes sense for them to, pay a massive amount for a huge elaborate plan when they can have a much cheaper shrunk back plan. I would support sort of the highest diversity level in healthcare plans and options as possible, and then increase transparency and portability. And I think the more you create sort of a market environment for that, the more prices or costs will go down. Obviously, it's a big challenge. It's a huge challenge. But anything we can do to get more in the right direction, I'm for on that. And that includes support for these group and sharing plans.
Excellent. We're going to move on to economic development and business climate.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few questions here. Over the past several years, we've seen Virginia adopt a number of clean energy policies that increase costs for businesses. How do we balance environmental stewardship with the competitiveness of Virginia's economy?
I think there's a couple sort of clear principles here, right? I think your word hit it on the head when you said environmental stewardship. I think we all recognize we have a responsibility, both locally and globally, to be good stewards of the earth and communities we've been given. I think that just sort of on a personal note, I spend a lot of time swimming, fishing in the James River. I'm an outdoorsman, so conservation and the environment's incredibly important to me, and I know it's important to to everybody in their day-to-day life. So I think we have got to be smart about the kind of policies we adopt when it comes to environmental regulations and sort of getting us to a cleaner future. I'll just tell you, as a baseline principle, I'm more of an incentive guy than a punitive guy. I think we should. I think in a lot of ways we're heading in the right direction, and I think in incentive-based models, as opposed to punishing people or forcing people to stop using X, Y, or Z, is almost always a better way to go. But I do think we cannot continue just sort of in a never-ending way, just layering on more and more and more burdens on local business, right? Because and this is sort of the trick, I think a lot of the environmental solutions that we have come up with and will come up with actually spawn out of the business world. It spawns out of creative thinking and creative business folks who actually can come up with a lot of our solutions. And I think we got to have a strong economy. We got to have low unemployment. So I'm not a fan of sort of continuing to layer on more and more burdens and regulations when it comes to businesses on this front. I think everybody's energy bill is going to go up based on a few of the things, the Clean Economy Act, I believe it's called, and a few other pieces of legislation that were already passed that I'm not sure were the wisest moves. But at the end of the day, we need to give businesses, especially small businesses, a lot of freedom and creativity in the way they work. And I want to remove as many barriers to their success as possible. The NFIB has endorsed our campaign and our candidacy, I think, because they understand that, you have to have a mindset of being for small business. You got to have a mindset of being for entrepreneurs. And we want to remove obstacles and roadblocks, not continue to place things in their way.
Thank you.
Well, I'll hold on. I was going to say something, but I'll hold off on.
I would say we got like 3 more questions that are probably going to, you'll be able to probably cover it. How do we recalibrate policies aimed at protecting workers' rights, particularly around worker classification, to ensure that entrepreneurship and business growth are not stymied?
Right. Well, all of these sort of things take they need a comprehensive approach. We should be a great state for business, and of course, we should also be a great state for workers. I think on the topic of right to work specifically, I think we need to. I'm a proponent of keeping right to work. I think it's critical. I think unions certainly serve an important role in society. I'm just not a fan of forced unionization when it comes to that. I think right to work is critical to our competitiveness, especially when you compare us to our sister states. Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee. We have already been outpaced on a business front by a lot of those folks. And I think if we got rid of right to work, that would frankly sort of be a death knell to our competitiveness. Now, having said that, of course, like you said, we need to have strong regs in place to protect workers. And I don't think this needs to always be an adversarial sort of either or conversation. I think we can cooperatively do both.
Thank you. Housing prices invariably increases, economic development accelerates. What's the role of state policy in ensuring the availability of affordable housing in light of population growth?
Yeah, that's a huge one. People ask about the affordable housing question all the time because it is critical for all sorts of people. I mean, I know a lot of folks who are first-time home buyers that have just had sort of a wild time in this market. I've also met a lot of folks who are in their older years and they're actually trying to downsize and they can't seem to find anything either because everything's just so expensive. So, I think the more we can do to, have cooperative public-private partnerships with, home builders and everything else to encourage, more affordable housing is critical. I think, it's critical to the region. It's critical to growth. And at the end of the day, it comes back to actually continued economic growth because you're not going to have a climate for good growth if you don't have any supply of housing, especially for new workers and younger folks coming to join businesses. So these things, are all intertwined with each other, but it's very important. The state's got to have their eye on the ball when it comes to this, and they got to, work to rightly incentivize this sort of thing in a cooperative way.
Thank you. How do we optimize the relationship between the Virginia Economic Development Partnership and local economic development authorities and industrial development authorities to ensure that Virginia maintains its status as the best state to do business?
Well, I think, open lines of communication, acting in a cooperative way, all of those things play into that. Virginia, we've sort of had it's been interesting because we've had some contradictory rankings, right? So we were ranked as the best state for business. On the other hand, we recently were ranked as being near the very bottom on best states to start a new business. And we're also lagging way behind in terms of jobs recovered that were lost in the pandemic. So we have some contradictory rankings out there. I think we need to keep our eye on the ball in terms of encouraging a climate that is friendly to business. That means low taxes. That means low regulations. And it means, to your question, it means open lines of communication and cooperation between all these folks so that we can get the best outcomes possible for business and eventually for families because they're the ones that rely on these businesses.
Excellent. Okay, and we're going to enter into our last category of state versus local authority. 39 states, including Virginia, operate under the Dillon Rule. What's your general outlook on the future of the Dillon Rule? Do you think that Virginia should expand the autonomy of localities by allowing them to apply for home rule status?
This is an interesting and good question. I would say, as a general matter, I think we should remain where we are. I think the sort of ultimate authority is with the state. However, I think that's balanced with a general agreement with sort of the principle of subsidiarity, right? I mean, I think generally speaking, most decisions should be made at the lowest level possible, right? Which is generally going to mean localities. However, I think we can do that while keeping the Dillon Rule. I think the state, one of the things I would want to do if the people of Chesterfield and Richmond and Henrico send me to the legislature in the 68th, I've heard from a lot of local folks that they don't feel like they have the working relationship they need with their representative in the General Assembly. And I think we can, frankly, have the best of both worlds if we keep the Dillon rule, but have better working relationships with the General Assembly and local folks, because local folks should be able to go to their representative, and if there's an issue with them not being able to do something they want to do, have a direct line of communication and be able to figure out a way to get it done, assuming it makes sense. So I think that's the best way to do it, as opposed to totally reversing course and getting rid of the Dillon rule. So that would be my general outlook on it. But I would, if I'm there, I want to have a very, very tight, close relationship with local folks, so that, they can get done what they need to get done. In a way, because if you get rid of it entirely, you risk just sort of a huge patchwork of different things all over the state. And I think at the end of the day, that could be more harmful than beneficial.
Okay. And then the last question we have is, do you support tax equalization between counties and cities?
I think that's something we can look at. I think we need to dive a little bit deeper on that before I would give a 100% yes or no on it, but it's certainly something to look at.
Okay, excellent. Well, again, I really appreciate your time being here. Thank you again for running for office. It's such a big commitment that it's a family decision. It's a personal decision, and it requires a lot, and it's in with the intentions of helping serve our community. So, on behalf of Chesterfield, we really truly appreciate your efforts. So,
well, thank you,
Danielle, do you have anything that you want to close? Mark, I forgot to ask. Do you have a closing statement you want to provide for a couple minutes here?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'll keep it short and sweet. But first of all, just thanks again, Bo. Thank you, Danielle, and thanks to the Chesterfield Chamber. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And I know I've talked to a lot of folks at some of the different events, so appreciate the time. And you're right. It's been a long, doing this has been a lot of fun, but it's also made for a long year. We've done, from the very beginning, we have focused on sort of a very on the ground approach. So we've been, knocking doors in every neighborhood. I don't even know the count. I mean, myself personally, I've knocked over probably between 6,000 and 7,000, which is made for a long year, but it's made for, I had a couple pairs of shoes, but it's actually been a great experience. And it's been a privilege actually to talk to so many folks and just hear directly from them at their doors, what they're thinking about, what they care about, all that sort of thing. I'll tell you what I hear over and over again from people is pretty basic things. I think people are concerned about their kids and their kids' education. I think people are concerned about having safe communities and safe streets. And I think folks are concerned about not only just sort of being pinched at the grocery store, at the gas station, but just sort of the overall climate of, I don't think a day goes by where I don't walk into some business and they either have a sign up or they just tell me, hey, listen, we can't do what we normally do because, we can't find anybody to work and all this sort of thing, right? So I think a lot of folks just feel like they're in a malaise on that front. I think people want folks to get back to work. They themselves want to get back to work. So these are the kind of things I hear over and over again. I think, of course, you also hear plenty of concerns about, what's going on nationally, whether it's, just huge spending, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's, humanitarian crisis at the border, all that sort of things. But you really it's been an honor because you get to hear from folks directly sort of what they're concerned about. And I'll tell you, having done that, I really have come to the conclusion that, this year in Virginia and locally here in Chesterfield, I really don't get the sense that this year is about partisanship. I don't get the sense that it's about, left versus right or Republican versus Democrat. I think folks are interested in, common sense ideas, common sense values, common sense solutions, and unifying around, some basic things that almost everybody can buy into. That schools should be open, standards should be high, curriculum shouldn't be politicized, parents should be involved. And again, parents should be involved always. That our streets should be safe, that there's dignity in work. We got to get people back to work. These are the kind of things that I hear folks talking about all the time. They want Virginia and they want Chesterfield to be, the best place to live, work, and raise a family. And these are the kind of things, that I want to focus on. I think the last thing I'll say is, being my particular roles of being in the world of criminal defense and being a foster parent, I want to bring a perspective, particularly on Virginia's kids. I think every kid in Virginia, we need to ensure has, a stable home, full stomach, strong education, right? So I want to help to improve and reform our foster care system. Being an insider, we do a lot of good for a lot of kids and families, but there's always, reforms to be had. So I want to increase support for, kinship and biological families. I want to make sure we have as many kids with families as possible, as opposed to group homes. And we also got an aging out crisis when it comes to foster care. And when kids hit the end of the line without finding a permanent home, they're way more likely to end up either homeless or wrapped or one of my clients in the criminal justice system. So we got to work on that. And then I think on the full stomach side of it, I want to work with our next governor to get rid of the grocery tax. I think it makes sense. I think it's an old regressive tax that hits families, especially working families with kids, the hardest. I think we need to get rid of that. I think we need to work with local schools to eliminate food waste, which I think there's some low-hanging fruit there. And then again, strong educations. We got to have open schools. We got to have cooperation between parents and teachers. And those are the kind of things I want to focus on. And again, just thank you all for the time. Thank you for speaking with me. And we got, I think, 13 days to go if my calendar's right. So if anybody hadn't voted, I know y'all already know early voting has started. It's been going a while now, actually. And then November 2nd is the big day. But thank y'all for all you do, especially to the members of the chamber. I know y'all do a lot for the community. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And once again, thanks for being here. Danielle, did you want to wrap this up?
Thank you. Thank you, Bo. Thank you, Mark, for joining us. I think you're right. 13 days left. Happy campaigning, door knocking season as you go into the last run. Chesterfield just opened up 5 more additional early voting stations at 5 of the libraries. You can find it at chesterfield.gov and see if you haven't voted yet. You can do so at one of those new stations around your community. This is our 4th series. We'll have these released and available on social media platforms, I believe by Friday, and you'll be able to share them with your constituents. We'll tag you in all of that as well.
Thank you.